The rain was a relentless assault against the windshield of Lena's beat-up sedan. She steered the car down the long, gravel driveway, the headlights cutting a weak path through the deluge. A strange unease settled over her as she killed the engine. It was more than just the storm, more than just the fatigue. It felt like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. She grabbed her bag and made a run for the porch, the cold rain soaking through her scrubs instantly. As she fumbled for her keys, her foot slipped on something slick and dark. She caught herself on the railing, her breath catching in her throat. It wasn't mud. It was blood, a thick, dark smear on the wooden planks of her porch, leading from the top of the steps into the shadows near her front door. Every instinct she had as an ER doctor screamed to life. Someone was hurt, badly, here. Forgetting her own safety, she followed the trail, huddled against the wall, trying to find shelter from the driving rain, was a creature from the darkest of fairy tales. It was a wolf, but it was impossible. It was massive, its shoulders easily reaching her waist, its fur, a breathtaking silver that seemed to shine even in the dim porch light, was matted with blood and grime. Deep gashes littered its body. Angry, torn wounds that looked like they came from claws and something else. Embedded high on its flank was the unmistakable glint of metal. A bullet. Lena's mind reeled. This was no ordinary wolf. A bear. Maybe a freakishly large coyote. No. The intelligence in its eyes was undeniable. As she stared, one of those eyes, a deep, piercing blue, opened and focused on her. There was no feral panic in that gaze, only an ancient, weary pain. Fear was a cold knot in her stomach, but compassion was a stronger, more familiar force. It was the same drive that pushed her through grueling shifts, the same need to mend what was broken. She couldn't leave it here to die. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. "Okay, big guy, we're going to get you inside." It was a Herculean effort. The wolf was a dead weight of muscle and bone. She grunted and strained, half dragging, half coaxing the enormous animal across her threshold and into the living room. It collapsed onto her hardwood floor with a ragged sigh, leaving a trail of bloody rainwater behind it. Lena's home was now a makeshift trauma bay. She raced to her bathroom, grabbing her largest medical kit, towels and antiseptic as she worked. A strange connection seemed to form between them. When she cleaned a deep gash on its leg, a sharp sting echoed in her own flesh. She could feel its pain, a throbbing ache that settled deep in her bones. It was unnerving, impossible. But she pushed the feeling aside. Triage first, existential crisis later. The bullet was the priority. It was lodged deep in the muscle. As her fingers probed the wound, they brushed against the metal. A searing, white-hot pain shot up her arm, as if she'd touched a live wire. She cried out, snatching her hand back. A red, angry burn marred her skin. But then, something even stranger happened. As she watched, the blistered skin shimmered and smoothed over, the redness fading until it was gone completely, leaving no trace of injury. She stared at her hand, her mind refusing to process what she'd just seen. A low growl from the floor pulled her back to reality. The wolf's body was convulsing, a terrible guttural sound, a scream of pure agony ripped from its throat. Lena watched in horror as its form began to shift, to contort in a way that defied all laws of nature. Bones snapped, audibly breaking and reforming under the skin. The beautiful silver fur receded, replaced by pale, stretched skin. The lupine muzzle flattened and reshaped itself into something human. She stumbled backward, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. The transformation was violent, brutal, and horrifying. And then it was over. Where the giant wolf had been, a man now lay sprawled on her floor. He was naked, his body a canvas of scars, old and new. broad shoulders and a chest corded with muscle tapered down to a narrow waist. His hair was black, long and wet, clinging to his face and neck, even unconscious, bruised and bleeding. He was the most beautiful man she had ever seen. His eyes fluttered open. They were the same deep, piercing blue. He was weak, his voice a raw whisper. You saved me," he rasped, confusion clouding his features. "Why would you—" Lena was frozen, her doctor's mind at war with the terrified woman who had just seen the impossible. The doctor won. He was still bleeding. His wounds were still open. She swallowed hard, grabbed her bandages, and knelt beside him, her hands shaking as she began to clean the gash on his side. He flinched at her touch, his gaze sharp and urgent. "They're coming," he warned, his voice gaining a sliver of strength. "You're in danger now. I shouldn't have come here." As if on cue, a sound pierced through the storm, a long, mournful howl, answered by another, and then another, until the night was filled with a chorus of predators. They were close, too close. Lena's head snapped toward the window. Beyond the rain-streaked glass, she could see them. Dozens of pairs of eyes, glowing like malevolent embers in the darkness of the surrounding woods. The man on her floor pushed himself up onto an elbow, his beautiful face grim. "My pack has found me," he said, his blue eyes locking onto hers. "But so has the enemy." The world outside Lena's small house had become a cage of glowing eyes and snarling threats. Inside, the air was thick with tension and the smell of wet earth and blood. The man, who had introduced himself as Kyle, sat propped against her sofa, a towel wrapped loosely around his waist. He moved with a stiff grace, as if fighting a pain that would have crippled any normal person. "They are the Blood Moon Pack," he explained, his voice a low rumble. "They hunt me. They hunt my pack. And now they know I am here. With you." Lena's heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. What do they want? Cale's jaw tightened. Power. Territory. And my head. He looked at her then, his blue eyes holding an apology she could feel in her soul. "There is an ancient law. My kind cannot enter a human dwelling unless invited. They will surround this house. They will wait, but they will not cross your threshold. Not yet." "But your pack," Lena began. "They cannot enter either," Cale finished, "which means they cannot protect us from out here." He let the weight of his words sink in. The choice was hers, an impossible choice. Keep the monsters out, and be trapped with one, or invite more in and turn her home into a battlefield. A sharp rapping at the back door made them both jump. It wasn't the desperate sound of someone seeking shelter, but a controlled, deliberate signal. "It's my beta," Cale said, relief and apprehension warring in his expression. "He's my second in command." Lena stared at the door, then back at Cale. She had saved him. Some unshakable instinct told her he was not the danger here. The danger was outside. Taking a deep, shaky breath, she walked to the door and opened it. 4 figures stood on her back porch, dripping water onto the planks. 3 men and 1 woman. They were all tall, built with a lean, predatory power that seemed to vibrate in the air around them. Their eyes held the same wild intelligence she'd seen in Kyle's wolf form. The one in the lead, a man with cold, assessing eyes and a scar that cut through his eyebrow, stepped forward. This had to be the beta. His gaze swept over Lena with undisguised hostility before landing on Cale. "Alpha," he said, his voice clipped and hard. "You are injured." "Thane," Cale acknowledged with a nod. "The human saved my life." Thane's cold eyes snapped back to Lena. "She saw you. She saw the change. The law is clear. She cannot be allowed to live." A fierce-looking woman with twin blades strapped to her back stepped forward, placing a hand on Thane's arm. "Thane, she saved him. Look at his wounds. She's a healer, not an enemy." "She's a liability." Maya, a third man, older and heavily scarred, growled. His name was Darius, and his mistrust was a palpable force. Our secret is everything. Lena felt a surge of anger cut through her fear. I'm standing right here, she said, her voice stronger than she expected. I didn't ask for any of this. I saw something hurt, and I helped. It's what I do. She looked directly at Cale. I chose to save you, and I don't regret it. The simple declaration hung in the air. The pack members looked from her to their alpha, waiting. Cale pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the pain that lanced through his side. His presence filled the room, an undeniable aura of command. She is under my protection, he stated, his voice leaving no room for argument. The old laws also state that a life debt must be honored. Lena has saved the life of this pack's alpha. She will be protected as one of our own. Just then, an older man, his hair streaked with gray and his face a roadmap of wisdom and worry, pushed his way to the front. He must have been waiting just beyond the others. He looked at Kael's wounds, his expression grave. But then his eyes landed on Lena. He froze. He stepped closer, his gaze fixed on her face, specifically her eyes. By the ancient moon, he breathed, his voice filled with a stunned reverence. Those eyes, it cannot be. Lena shifted uncomfortably. What about my eyes? The old man, who Cale introduced as Magnus, the pack's elder, reached out as if to touch her face, then stopped himself. The green flecks in the brown. It is the sign. Faint, but it is there. You are a moonlight witch. The room went silent. Lena could only stare. What? I'm a doctor. I work at the city hospital. I'm just normal. Magnus shook his head slowly. No, child. Your line was thought to be extinct for 20 years. They were the keepers of the balance, wielders of lunar magic, born to walk the line between our world and the human one. Before Lena could even begin to process the absurdity of what he was saying, a howl, sharp and aggressive, cut through the night. It was followed by a crash as something heavy slammed against the side of the house. The attack had begun. Damien's pack was testing the boundaries, a brutal display of force. Lena watched from the window, her blood running cold. As Kael's pack shifted, the changes were just as violent, just as unnatural as Kael's had been. In moments, 4 massive wolves, Thane's a dark gray, Maya's a sleek black, Darius's a grizzled brown stood ready. Cale, despite his injuries, let out a low growl, his own body tense as if fighting the change. He was staying human. For her. The chaos outside was terrifying. Snarls and yelps echoed in the storm as the blood moon wolves clashed with her unlikely protectors. A young, sandy-haired wolf she hadn't met yet, whom Maya called Finn, was thrown against the side of the house. He landed in a heap, and a hulking black wolf charged at him, jaws open for the killing bite. No, the word was torn from Lena's throat. Without thinking, she threw her hand out toward the window, as if she could physically stop the attack. A shimmering, silver light erupted from her palm. It slammed into the charging wolf, sending it flying backward with a pained yelp. The fighting outside stuttered to a halt. Every wolf, friend and foe, stared at the house, at her. The Blood Moon pack, unnerved by this display of unexpected power, began to retreat into the forest. Inside, Kael's pack stared at Lena with a new mixture of awe and fear. Her hand was still outstretched, glowing with a soft, ethereal moonlight that pulsed in time with her frantic heartbeat before slowly fading away. Magnus looked at her, his old eyes filled with a terrible certainty. "It has begun," he whispered. The adrenaline crash was absolute. The moment the last of the enemy wolves had vanished into the tree line, Lena's legs gave out. She crumpled to the floor, her mind and body shutting down from the sheer, overwhelming impossibility of the last few hours. The world dissolved into blackness. She awoke 14 hours later in her own bed. Sunlight streamed through the window. mocking the darkness of the previous night. For a dizzying second, she allowed herself to believe it was all a dream, a hallucination brought on by stress and too much caffeine. But then she saw Maya, sitting in a chair in the corner of her room, sharpening one of her twin blades. The soft, rhythmic scrape of stone on steel was a stark reminder that this was her new reality. "Hey," Maya said softly, a small smile on her face. "Welcome back. You gave us a scare." "What happened?" Lena's voice was hoarse. "You passed out after you did your light show," Maya explained, her eyes wide with lingering amazement. "Cale carried you in here. He hasn't left your door since." A strange warmth bloomed in Lena's chest at the thought. Cale, the alpha, the man who was a wolf. He was standing guard for her. Later, after she'd showered and dressed, Magnus sat with her at her small kitchen table. He was the keeper of stories, and her story, he explained, was one of blood and tragedy. The Moonlight Witches drew their power from the moon. He began, his voice low and steady. They could heal, create shields of pure energy, and feel the ebb and flow of magic in the world. But their power came at a cost. Every use drains one's life force, and it is a bloodline with two sides, light and shadow. If a witch loses control, if they give in to despair or rage, the shadow can consume them. He paused, his expression turning somber. 20 years ago, a great battle took place. The coven was slaughtered, betrayed from within by one of their own, the most powerful of them, a witch named Morgana, fell to the shadow after the death of her daughter, consumed by grief and darkness. She murdered her own kin, seeking a power so absolute it could break the world. Lena listened, a cold dread seeping into her veins. She already knew how this story ended. Only one escaped the massacre, Magnus finished, his old eyes filled with pity. A small child, saved from the flames by a loyal guardian who died to ensure her escape. "The fire, the dream, it wasn't a dream. That child," Lena whispered, her hands trembling. "It was me." "Yes," Magnus confirmed gently. "And Morgana was your grandmother." The revelation hit her like a physical blow. The monster who had destroyed her family was her own blood. The darkness Magnus spoke of wasn't just a concept, it was a part of her heritage. A pained grunt from the living room shattered the heavy silence. They rushed in to find Cale on his feet, his face pale and slick with sweat. The bandages around his side were soaked through with a foul, blackish pus. "The wound," Thane said, his voice tight with alarm. "It's not healing." Magnus peeled back the bandage. The flesh was turning black, crisscrossed with dark, creeping veins. "This is not a normal wound," he declared. "The bullet was laced with dark magic. A witch's curse. Our healing abilities can't fight it." He looked at Lena. "But yours can. Only the magic of a moonlight witch can purify such a curse." Lena stared at Cale, at the lines of pain etched around his mouth, at the feverish glint in his blue eyes. He was dying because of a witch's magic, and she, the descendant of a dark witch, was his only hope. "Tell me what to do," she said, her resolve hardening. That night, they brought Cale outside. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky washed clean and a brilliant, full moon that bathed the world in silver light. Magnus instructed Lena to sit before Cale, to take his hand, and to reach for the moon, not with her hands, but with her heart. "Think of healing," Magnus guided her. "Think of light. Call to the moon as your ancestors did." Lena closed her eyes. She focused on the cool, silver light she could feel on her skin. She thought of her strange dreams, of the woman calling to her. She let the instinct, buried for so long, rise to the surface. She reached. A cool, tingling energy flooded her senses. It poured down from the sky, flowed through her veins, and pooled in her palms. When she opened her eyes, A soft, white-silver light was emanating from her hands, which were clasped around Kael's. She saw visions then, flashes of women in white robes, standing in a circle around her, their voices a low, melodic chant. They were her ancestors, their power flowing into her. She pushed that power into Kael. A scream was torn from his throat as the magic met the curse. His body arched in agony, his wolf form fighting to surface, claws elongating, fangs descending. Black smoke, shrieking with a malevolent energy, was drawn from his wound, dissipating into the night air. The black veins receded, and healthy pink tissue began to knit itself together beneath her hands. The effort was immense. It felt like every ounce of her life was being siphoned away. A warm trickle of blood ran from her nose. The world started to spin, the silver light fading to gray. She collapsed, her strength utterly gone. But this time, Kael was there to catch her. He pulled her against his chest, his breathing still ragged, but his body warm and strong. The fever was gone. He held her close, his face buried in her hair. "Why would you do that?" he whispered, his voice thick with an emotion she couldn't name. "You barely know me." Lena was too weak to answer. She could only lean against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. It was the safest she had felt in her entire life. A quiet moment passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of the profound thing that had just happened. It was Thane who broke the spell. He appeared at the edge of the clearing, his expression urgent. "Alpha," he said, his voice grim. "We found tracks. The witch's magic is strong. She's been here, watching." The pack decided they couldn't wait for the enemy to come to them again. They had to hunt. Kael's first command was for Lena to stay at the house, where it was safe. Lena, however, had other ideas. "No," she said, her voice quiet but firm. She stood before him, still feeling the phantom ache of the healing, but resolved. "You said this was witch's magic. I can feel it now, a sour feeling in the air. I can help you find them." Kael's blue eyes darkened with worry. "It's too dangerous. Lena." "It's more dangerous to sit here and wait for my evil grandmother to show up for a family reunion," she countered dryly. "I'm going with you." A tense argument followed, with Thane siding firmly with Kael. But Maya spoke up for her. And in the end, Kael relented with a sigh. "You do not leave my side," he commanded. "Not for a second." He shifted then, becoming the immense silver wolf once more. The transformation was still jarring, but no longer terrifying. It was a part of him. They moved through the forest as a unit. The world through Lena's newly awakened senses was a vibrant, overwhelming place. She could feel the steady, thrumming life of the trees, the skittish energy of a deer hiding in the undergrowth, and the dark, sickly trail of magic they were following. It felt like a string of rotten thread, pulling them deeper into the woods. Kael, in his wolf form, trotted silently beside her, his massive body a warm, comforting presence. He was a constant shield, his head always on a swivel, his blue eyes scanning every shadow. At one point, Maya, loping easily on the other side of her, nudged her with a grin. "The Alpha's never been this protective of anyone," she murmured. "Not even Pack." Lena felt a blush creep up her neck. She couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. A strange, magnetic force that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with the man himself. They stopped to rest by a clear, fast-moving stream. Kael shifted back, sitting beside her on a moss-covered rock. The rest of the pack kept a respectful distance, giving their alpha his privacy. "My entire life has been about duty," Kael said, breaking the silence as he stared into the water. "To my father, and then to the pack. Be strong, be decisive. Never show weakness. It is the alpha's burden." "But you're also a person," Lena found herself saying. "You're allowed to be tired. You're allowed to hurt." He turned to look at her. A strange, vulnerable light in his eyes. No one has ever said that to me before. Her gaze fell on a long, silvery scar that cut across his shoulder, acting on instinct. She reached out, her fingers gently tracing the raised line of tissue. This one looks old. His muscles tensed under her touch, but he didn't pull away. The day my father died, a rival pack ambushed our patrol. I wasn't fast enough, not strong enough to save him. But you were strong enough to lead your pack afterward, Lena said softly. You were strong enough to keep them together. That's what matters. He stared at her, his expression unreadable. The space between them crackled with unspoken energy. He leaned in, his lips just inches from hers, and her breath caught. The moment was shattered by Thane's sharp voice. Alpha, we found it. It was an abandoned paper mill, a skeletal ruin of rusted metal and broken windows. The air around it was heavy and cold, thick with the corrupt magic Lena could now taste on her tongue. Strange symbols were painted on the walls in something dark and crusted. Blood. It's a summoning ritual, Lena whispered, her body going cold. They're trying to open a gateway. Magnus, who had been brought along for his knowledge, nodded grimly from the edge of the clearing, a gateway to the Shadowlands. If they succeed, things far worse than the Blood Moon Pack will pour into your world. Suddenly, a mocking laugh echoed from the ruins. A man stepped out of the shadows, flanked by a dozen of his own pack. He was handsome in a cruel, sharp way, with eyes that held a chilling emptiness. KL, he sneered. So sentimental, getting weak in your old age. And what's this? You've picked up a human pet. This had to be Damien. Kale stepped in front of Lena, a protective growl rumbling in his chest. She is not a weapon for you to use. Damien. Damien's smile widened. It was a predator's smile. Oh, I don't need to capture her. The darkness in her own blood will bring her to us. Eventually. With a roar, he launched himself forward, and the clearing erupted into a vicious snarl of claws and teeth. The two packs clashed in a brutal, bloody battle. Lena tried to stay back, to heal those she could, but the fighting was too chaotic. She saw Darius go down, a deep gash in his side, his lifeblood pouring onto the forest floor. Desperation clawed at her. She couldn't lose him. She couldn't lose any of them. She reached for her power, pouring it into Darius, but the dark magic from Damien's claws fought against her, a poison that resisted the light. The fear, the helplessness, it was too much. Something inside her snapped. The silver light that flowed from her hands flickered, sputtered, and turned a horrifying shade of black. A raw, immense power, cold and terrifying, exploded from her. It threw everyone, friend and foe alike, backward. The trees groaned, and shadows twisted into unnatural shapes around her. And then she spoke, but it was not her voice. It was an ancient female voice, dripping with dark amusement, coming from her own lips. My granddaughter finally awakens. Lena Kale's voice, filled with terror, cut through the haze. Lena, grab my hand, fight it. He scrambled toward her, ignoring his own injuries, and grabbed her hand, his own energy. The warm, steady power of his alpha spirit flowed into her. It was an anchor in a sea of darkness. The black energy receded. Lena blinked, her own consciousness rushing back. She looked around at the destruction, at the terrified faces of Kael's pack, and the horrified realization of what she had just done crashed down on her. Damien and his pack were already retreating, his mocking laughter echoing behind them. You see, Kael, she'll be the death of you. It's her destiny. Lena began to tremble uncontrollably, staring at her own hands as if they were venomous snakes. You have to get away from me, she choked out, backing away from Kael. I'm dangerous. Kael's face was grim, but his eyes were filled with an unshakable resolve. He stepped forward, closing the distance she had made. I'm not going anywhere. The ride back to her house was a blur of shame and terror. Lena huddled in the passenger seat of Thane's truck, wrapping her arms around herself, trying to contain the volatile thing that lived inside her. She refused to meet anyone's eyes. She could feel their fear. It radiated off them in waves, a justified fear that made her stomach clench with self-loathing. Once home, she fled to her bedroom and locked the door. She was a monster, a ticking time bomb. Damien was right. She would be the death of them all. She ignored Maya's soft knocks and gentle pleas to eat something. She ignored Thane's gruff, surprisingly concerned questions through the door. The darkness was a living entity inside her, and it whispered to her in the silence. It showed her images of her power turning on the pack, of her hurting Kale, in her dreams. Morgana came to her, a shadowy figure with Lena's own eyes. "You cannot deny your nature, child," the dream witch purred. "Our blood is the blood of power. Why settle for a flicker of light when you can command the entire night?" She spent a day and a night lost in that spiral of fear. On the second morning, she heard a solid, patient presence settle outside her door. It was Kyle. He didn't knock. He just sat on the floor in the hallway, his back against the wall opposite her door, and he started to talk. His voice was a low, soothing rumble that seeped through the wood. He told her about the first time he'd shifted. He'd been 16, and the change had been violent and uncontrollable. He'd lost his mind to the wolf, and in his frenzy, he had badly injured his best friend. He talked about the weeks that followed, the crushing guilt, the terror of his own strength, the feeling that he was a monster who didn't deserve to be around anyone. "I understand how you feel, Lena," he said, his voice raw with the memory. "You feel like something inside you is broken, something dangerous, but you are not alone in this. I promise you." He sat there for hours, just talking, sharing pieces of himself, vulnerabilities he'd probably never shown anyone. He wasn't the invincible alpha now, he was just Kyle, a man who understood darkness. Slowly, hesitantly, Lena's hand went to the doorknob. She turned it and pulled the door open. Kale was sitting on the floor as promised, looking weary but resolute. He looked up and his blue eyes softened when he saw her tear-streaked face. "I'm so scared," she whispered, the words she'd been holding back finally tumbling out. "I'm scared that one day I'll become her, that I won't be me anymore." He rose to his feet in one fluid motion and stood before her. "Then I will be here to remind you who you are," he said, his voice fierce with conviction. "If I have to remind you every day for the rest of our lives, I will." She looked up at his impossibly beautiful face, at the sincerity etched into every line. "Why? Why do you have this much faith in me?" He was silent for a long moment, his gaze searching hers. When he finally spoke, his words changed everything. "Because you are my mate." Lena blinked. "You're what?" The explanation came from Magnus, who had been summoned by a silent signal from Kyle. They sat in the living room, the afternoon sun a poor imitation of the moonlight that now defined her life. "The mate bond is the most sacred connection in our world," Magnus explained gently. "It is a bond of souls, chosen by destiny itself. A werewolf has only one true mate in their lifetime. When they find each other, their spirits, their strengths, their very life forces become intertwined." He paused, letting the weight of the statement settle. If one dies, the other rarely survives the loss. It was too much. A connection that deep, it was terrifying. But Magnus wasn't finished. "There is more," he said, his expression grave. "Kale's bloodline carries an ancient curse. An alpha of his line who finds his mate must complete the bonding ritual before the third full moon passes. If they fail," he looked from Kale's stoic face to Lena's pale one, "both will die." The room spun, a death sentence, another one. "How long?" she whispered. "Tonight is the first full moon since we met," Kale answered, his voice devoid of emotion. We have 2 months. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. No, she said, shaking her head, backing away. You can't tie yourself to me. I'm a weapon waiting to go off. I could be your destruction long before any curse is... Kael's expression, for the first time, showed a flash of pain, but his voice was unwavering. My choice was made the moment I woke up on your floor and saw you. Destiny chose you for me. Lena, nothing else matters. But I don't know what I feel, she stammered, her own emotions a tangled mess of fear, gratitude, and a terrifying, undeniable attraction. I'm not asking you to feel anything you are not ready for, Kael said, his voice softening, but I will not abandon you, and I will not let you abandon yourself. That night, Lena made a decision. She couldn't run. She couldn't hide. Her only path was forward. She had to learn to control this power, to fight the shadow within. The next day, as if summoned by her resolve, a new entity appeared. Magnus had led her to an ancient, gnarled oak tree deep in the forest, a place that pulsed with serene energy. A woman coalesced from the bark of the tree, her form made of leaves and light, her eyes as old as the forest itself. She was Arya, a dryad, a spirit of the wood, and a keeper of the old ways, and she agreed to teach Lena. The pack fell into a new routine. They established a perimeter around Lena's house, a constant, watchful guard of silver and gray wolves. Lena spent her days with Arya, learning to meditate, to draw power not from her volatile emotions, but from the life of the forest around her. And every night, she would look out her window and see him, a magnificent silver wolf, sitting sentinel under the moon, his piercing blue eyes fixed on her house, watching over her. And against all reason, against all her fear, a warmth would spread through her chest. It felt dangerously like hope, but in her dreams, the shadows still whispered, "He is your weakness, child, and you will be his doom." The days that followed were a strange blend of magical boot camp and quiet discovery. Lena's training with Arya was grueling. The nature spirit was a patient but demanding teacher. She taught Lena to quiet her mind, to feel the pulse of the earth beneath her feet, the flow of water in the hidden streams, the life force in every leaf and blade of grass. Your power is a river, Arya's whispery voice would explain as Lena sat cross-legged under the ancient oak. Your emotions are the storm that makes it flood and destroy. You must learn to be the riverbed, guiding the flow, not the storm that unleashes it. Progress was slow. More than once, Lena's frustration would cause sparks of dark energy to crackle at her fingertips, but she was learning. She could now summon a soft, silver light at will, a gentle warmth that could encourage a wilted flower to bloom again. It was a small victory, but it was hers. Throughout it all, Kael was a constant, silent shadow. He never interfered with her training, but he was always there, leaning against a distant tree in his human form, or watching from the edge of the clearing as a silver wolf. His presence was a comfort, a silent promise of protection that allowed her to focus. After her sessions with Arya, he would walk with her back to the house. It was in these quiet moments that the fragile connection between them began to grow. They would sit by the creek, the cool evening air settling around them, and they would talk. He told her about growing up as the alpha's son, the immense pressure to be perfect, the loneliness of being set apart from the others. He spoke of the wind in his fur when he ran, the pure, unthinking freedom of it. In return, Lena found herself opening up in a way she never had before. She told him about her solitary life, the walls she'd built around her heart after the fire, her deep-seated desire for a family, a place to belong. "You have that now," he told her one evening, his voice soft. "You belong with us, with me." His sincerity chipped away at her defenses. Piece by piece, she found herself smiling more, laughing at Finn's goofy jokes, even engaging and wary, respectful debates with Thane, who was slowly, begrudgingly, starting to see her as more than just a human liability. One night, after a particularly draining session, Lena stumbled, her legs weak from channeling energy. Kael was there in an instant, his strong arms catching her before she could fall. She was flush against his chest, her head resting on his shoulder. She could feel the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his skin through his shirt. "Are you tired of this?" she murmured into his shoulder. "Having to take care of me?" "Never," he whispered, his breath warm in her hair. His voice was absolute. She looked up at him then, her brown eyes meeting his intense blue ones. The world seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them in a bubble of silent electricity. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of the intensity of his gaze. She reached up, her hand cupping his cheek, his skin warm and slightly rough with stubble. He went utterly still at her touch, his breath catching. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely audible, "for not giving up on me." "I never will," he vowed, his gaze dropping to her lips. The moment was broken by Thane, who appeared at the edge of the woods, his face grim. "Alpha. Scouts have reported movement. A large party of Blood Moon wolves, gathering at the western border. Damien is with them. It looks like they're preparing for a full-scale assault." Kael's posture instantly shifted, the softness gone, replaced by the hard authority of the Alpha. But before he turned to go, he captured her hand, his fingers lacing with hers. His grip was firm, a promise. "When this is over," he said, his eyes locking with hers, "there is something I must ask you." The attack came that night, and it was everything Thane had feared. Damien's pack descended on Lena's small property not with stealth, but with overwhelming, brutal force. Leading them was not only Damien, but a tall, cruel-looking woman whose fingers crackled with the same sickly magic Lena had felt at the mill. This was Ravenna. The battle was a blur of violence. Lena stayed inside, frantically working to heal the injuries of pack members who were dragged back from the front line. The sounds of the fight were horrific, the snarls of wolves, the clash of bodies, the screams of pain. Then Finn was carried in, his breathing shallow, a gaping wound in his chest that was bleeding too fast. Lena's hands hovered over him, pouring light and energy into him, but it was like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it. He was slipping away. Despair, cold and sharp, threatened to overwhelm her. The whispers of the shadow returned. "Use me. I have the power to save him." "No," Lena whispered, tears streaming down her face as she looked at Finn's pale face. She looked out the window, at the chaos, at Kael fighting two wolves at once, and she did the only thing she could think of. She prayed, not to a god, but to the moon. As if in answer, the clouds parted, and the brilliant light of the full moon, the second full moon, flooded the battlefield. A surge of pure, clean power, unlike anything she had ever felt, poured into her. It wasn't chaotic or emotional. It was calm, ancient, and absolute. This time, she didn't lose control. She became a conduit. A wave of silver energy pulsed out from her, washing over the entire property. The injured members of Kael's pack felt their wounds stitch closed, their strength return. The Blood Moon wolves, however, howled in pain, as if the pure light was a physical acid. They broke and fled, vanishing into the darkness, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. Ravenna, however, paused at the edge of the woods. She pointed a long, bony finger at the house. "The blood moon rises in 3 days' time," she shrieked, her voice laced with malice. "Your mistress will come to claim what is her, little witch." The ground around the house seemed to tremble, and a faint, dark energy soaked into the soil before Ravenna disappeared after her pack. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The aftermath of the battle was a strange mix of relief and dread. No one had died, thanks to Lena's intervention, but the pack was battered and bruised. Kyle had a nasty bite on his arm from Damien, and while Lena's wave of healing had closed the wound, a faint, dark toxin remained, causing his fever to spike. Lena refused to rest. She sat by Kyle's bedside all night, wiping his feverish brow with a cool cloth, changing his bandages, and murmuring words of comfort whenever he tossed and turned in a delirious sleep. He called her name in his sleep, his voice rough with pain and something else, need. Sometime before dawn, his fever broke. He woke, his blue eyes clear but weary, and found her asleep in the chair beside him, her head resting on the edge of his bed, her hand still loosely holding his. He gently tightened his grip, a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with any lingering fever. When she woke, he was watching her, his expression soft. "You stayed," he said simply. "Of course I did," she replied, her heart giving a little flutter. The peace of the morning was shattered by the sky. As the sun set that evening, the moon began to rise, not in its usual pearlescent white, but in a sickening, bloody crimson, the blood moon. The moment its light touched her skin, Lena felt it, a cold, insistent pull from deep within her soul, tugging her toward the darkness. Morgana's voice echoed in her mind, no longer a whisper, but a clear, commanding summons. 3 nights, granddaughter, and on the 3rd, you will come home. Arya appeared in a shimmer of leaves, her face etched with worry. It is a summoning ritual of immense power, the Dryad warned. Morgana is using the blood moon and a blood sacrifice, the blood spilled on your land by Ravenna, to create a magical tether. She's pulling you to her. Magnus's face was grim. There is only one power strong enough to shield you from a blood magic summons of this magnitude, he said, looking at Kale, and then at Lena, the completed mate bond. The union of an alpha werewolf and a moonlight witch would create a ward of power so absolute, not even Morgana could break it. He took a deep breath. But the ritual must be undertaken willingly, a true union of heart, spirit, and body. It cannot be forced. Yes. The implication hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. They had to complete the final, most intimate stage of the bonding, or Lena would be lost. The next morning, Lena knew what she had to do. She found Kale by the creek, staring into the rushing water, his shoulders tense. "Magnus told me about the bonding," she began, her voice shaking slightly. Kale didn't turn around. "I will not force you into this. Lena, we will find another way." His voice was flat, but she could feel the heartbreak behind it. "What if it's not about force?" she said softly. He turned then, his eyes wide with a desperate, fragile hope. "What are you saying?" She took a step closer, her gaze locked on his. "I don't know if this is what people call love. I've never felt it before. All I know is that when you were hurt, it felt like my own body was failing when I see you smile. There's a warmth inside me that I've never known. And the thought of my life without you in it, it's unbearable." Her voice cracked on the last word. "I don't want to lose you, Kale." He closed the distance between them in 2 long strides, his hands coming up to gently cup her face. "Lena," he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. "That is all I have ever needed to hear." He looked into her eyes, all of his love, his devotion, his soul-deep need for her on full display. "I love you," he said, his voice raw and certain. "I think I loved you from the moment I opened my eyes and saw you, a stubborn little human determined to save a monster in a storm. You are the light in all of my darkness." And then he lowered his head and kissed her. It wasn't a desperate, frantic kiss. It was a kiss of pure, unadulterated reverence. It was soft, questioning, a gentle exploration. And Lena, without a moment's hesitation, responded. She melted against him, her arms wrapping around his neck, her fingers tangling in his long, dark hair. The kiss deepened, becoming a passionate, fiery exchange that sent a jolt of pure energy through her body. It felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, breathless, they were both trembling. A faint, silver-white aura pulsed around them, their two energies beginning to harmonize. "Let's do it," Lena whispered, her forehead resting against his. "Let's do the ritual." "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice husky. She looked up at him and smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I am choosing you, Kale. Not out of fear, not because of a curse, but because I want to be with you." Their decision was made. Magnus began the preparations for the ritual, to be held the next night, under the second blood moon, but their fragile peace was shattered when Finn, their fastest scout, returned with a panicked report. Morgana had been sighted. She was no longer pulling from a distance. She was here, just beyond the pack's territory, gathering her dark forces. A final, cataclysmic battle was inevitable. The day was spent in a state of suspended animation, the calm before a hurricane. Every member of the pack moved with a quiet, determined purpose, preparing for the battle and the ritual that were now inextricably linked. Maya came to Lena's room, her arms full of soft, white cloth. She helped Lena prepare, her usual boisterous energy replaced by a gentle solemnity. The dress for the ceremony was simple, a sleeveless sheath of white linen that felt cool against Lena's skin. Maya wove a crown of pale, night-blooming flowers, lunar blossoms. She called them for Lena's hair. They bathed Lena's hands and feet in water infused with cleansing herbs, a tradition as old as the pack itself. "I'm a little jealous, you know," Maya confided as she brushed Lena's long, dark hair, a true mate bond. It's the greatest gift our world has to offer. "Are you worried?" Lena asked, her voice small. "About the part of me that's her?" Maya met her gaze in the mirror, her expression fierce and loyal. "You've shown us who you are." "Lena, blood is just blood. The choices you make, that's what defines your heart." Elsewhere, Thane was with KL. He checked the Alpha's healing arm, applying a soothing salve. There were no orders given, no strategies discussed. They were two friends, two brothers, facing the dawn of a new era for their pack. "I was wrong about her," Thane said, his voice low. "I am sorry I ever doubted her." Kale clapped a hand on his friend's shoulder. "You were protecting your pack. I would expect nothing less." "She will be a great Luna," Thane stated, not as an opinion, but as a fact. I can already see it. Late in the afternoon, Kale found Lena by the lake where they'd had so many of their conversations. They didn't speak for a long time, just sat on the shore, their hands clasped together, watching the sun begin its slow descent. "Do you regret any of this?" Kale asked softly. Lena squeezed his hand. "No, do you?" "My only regret," he said, turning to face her, his blue eyes impossibly deep, "is that I didn't have 1,000 years to know you before this." They stayed there until dusk painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, cherishing the last moments of peace they might ever have. The world around them seemed to sense the coming darkness. Flocks of birds took to the sky, flying away in a mass exodus. The air grew heavy, charged with a static electricity that made the hair on Lena's arms stand up. Arya appeared before them, her leafy form trembling. "The dark magic is gathering." She warned, "She is marshaling her power. Tonight will not be peaceful." Kale's face hardened. He gave the order the entire pack was to be on high alert, ready for battle at a moment's notice. As the last sliver of the sun disappeared, the blood moon rose. Larger and redder than the night before, it cast an apocalyptic glow over the landscape. Lena felt the pull again, stronger this time, a physical ache in her chest. Morgana's laughter echoed on the wind, a sound of madness and possessive greed. You think a little puppy ritual can keep you from me, child? You belong to the shadow." There was no turning back. Despite the imminent threat, the ritual had to proceed. It was their only hope. The pack gathered at the heart of the forest, in a sacred clearing dominated by a single, flat-topped monolith of ancient stone. This was a place of immense natural power, their best and only defense. Kale took Lena's hand, his grip warm and steady, a rock in the churning sea of her fear. His eyes searched hers, filled with a love so profound it stole her breath. "Ready?" he asked. She looked at him, at her alpha, her protector, her partner, and the last of her fear melted away, replaced by a fierce, burning resolve. "With you," she answered. "I'm always ready." The sacred clearing was a pocket of defiant tranquility in a world poised on the brink of war. Magnus had meticulously drawn a large circle around the ancient monolith, using a mixture of salt, powdered silver, and sacred herbs that shimmered faintly under the crimson moonlight. The members of the Silver Moon Pack, in their powerful wolf forms, created a living, breathing perimeter around the clearing, their glowing eyes a ring of amber and gold staring out into the oppressive darkness. Arya stood by the ancient oak at the edge of the circle, her hands pressed against its trunk, calling upon the spirits of the forest to lend their strength to the ward. Kael led Lena into the center of the circle. The air inside felt different, calmer, warmer, charged with an ancient, benevolent power. Outside the circle, the wind howled and Morgana's malevolent energy pressed in, but it could not penetrate the barrier. Here, there was only them. Magnus began to chant in the old tongue, his voice a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate with the very earth. Under the gaze of the blood moon, witnessed by the spirits of old, 2 souls shall become one, 2 hearts shall beat in unison, 2 lives shall merge into a single stream, flowing toward a shared destiny. Kael and Lena faced each other, their hands clasped. They began their vows, their voices clear and steady in the sacred space. Kael went first. "I, Kael Thorn, Alpha of the Silver Moon Pack, take you, Lena Pham, to be my mate, my Luna, my other half. I vow to protect you with my life, to honor you with my loyalty, and to love you with every beat of my heart, until my last breath is gone from this world." Tears welled in Lena's eyes as she spoke her own oath, the words flowing from a place of deep, undeniable truth. "I, Lena Pham, descendant of the Moonlight Witches, take you, Kael Thorn, to be my mate, my alpha, my anchor in the storm. I vow to stand by your side, to share my strength and my weakness, and to love you with all that I am until the moon falls from the sky." As the final words were spoken, the next phase of the ritual began, the imprinting of the soul. With a tenderness that belied the primal nature of the act, Kael lowered his head to her shoulder, his fangs descended, and he bit down gently, just enough to break the skin. It wasn't a bite of aggression, but of possession, of marking. A sharp sting gave way to a wave of dizzying pleasure. A jolt of pure, untamed wolf energy shot through Lena's veins, connecting her to him, to the entire pack, in a way she could never have imagined. His spirit was now a part of hers. In return, she placed her hand over his heart, focusing her will. She called upon the moon's power, a glowing, silver sigil. The crescent moon of her ancestors burned itself onto the skin of his chest, a painless mark of light and magic, a wave of her own essence, of moonlight and stubborn human resilience, flowed into him, a calming presence to temper his wild spirit. Their eyes met, pupils dilated, breathing heavy. The bond was forged, but it was not yet complete. The energies swirling around them, red and silver, demanded a final, physical union to seal the connection. "Lena," Kael whispered, his voice husky, his blue eyes dark with a desire that mirrored her own. "If you want to stop, Tell me now." She shook her head, a silent, definite no. "I want all of you," she breathed, completely. In the sacred, protected space, they were the only two people in the universe. He swept her into his arms and laid her down on a bed of soft moss and scattered lunar blossoms that had been prepared on the ancient stone. He moved with a reverent slowness, his eyes never leaving hers, memorizing every feature as if seeing her for the first time. He slowly, carefully, pushed the linen straps of her dress off her shoulders, his knuckles grazing her skin, leaving a trail of fire in their wake. The cool night air on her bare skin was a stark contrast to the heat building within her. "You are so beautiful," he murmured, his voice thick with awe. She felt a blush rise to her cheeks, but she did not look away. This was not a moment for shyness. This was a moment of absolute truth. She reached up, her hands fumbling slightly as she untied the leather cord that held his pants, her own boldness surprising her. This was her first time, a truth her body made clear in its trembling anticipation. He seemed to know it instinctively. Every touch was gentle, every kiss a question, every movement a patient exploration. He worshipped her with his hands, his mouth, charting the landscape of her body until she was arching against him, a silent plea on her lips. As they finally came together, a gasp escaped both of them. It was more than a physical joining. It was a cataclysmic collision of souls. She felt everything. He was his strength, his loneliness, his fierce love for her, the primal wildness of his wolf. He, in turn, felt her resilience, her compassion, her fear, and the dormant, immense power that slept within her. The energies that had been swirling around them surged inward, flooding their bodies. Silver and crimson light exploded from the point of their connection, pushing back the oppressive darkness beyond the circle in a visible wave of power. The ward Magnus had created pulsed, strengthened 100-fold by their union. Lena cried out his name, Cale's roar of possession and love a direct answer. They were no longer two separate souls, but one, Alpha and Luna, wolf and witch, darkness and light, united. In the aftermath, they lay entwined on the cold stone, their bodies slick with sweat, their breathing slowly returning to normal. Cale held her, his hand stroking her hair, his heart beating a steady, reassuring rhythm against her ear. The bond was complete. She could feel him in her mind, a warm, constant presence. She felt his overwhelming love for her as if it were her own emotion. And through the bond, he felt her sense of peace, of rightness, of finally, truly, belonging. But their perfect, sacred moment was ripped apart by a blood-curdling scream from the edge of the clearing. One of the pack wolves, a young male named Reese, had been snatched by a whip of pure shadow that had momentarily breached the ward. He was dragged into the darkness, his yelps cut short abruptly. Morgana had arrived. The battle had begun. Cale was on his feet in an instant, his body radiating pure, untamed alpha fury. He helped Lena to her feet, his eyes blazing with a protective fire. "Stay in the circle," he commanded, his voice a low growl that promised death to their enemies. "No," Lena said, her voice steady. She pulled her dress back on, her movements quick and sure. The power of the bond was thrumming through her, a boundless well of strength. We fight them together. She could feel his hesitation, his instinct to shield her, but then he felt her resolve through the bond, her strength mirroring his. He gave her a short, sharp nod. Together, he agreed. Hand in hand, the Alpha and his Luna stepped out of the sacred circle to face the oncoming night. The forest had transformed into a nightmare, twisted shadow creatures, vaguely wolf-like but with too many limbs and glowing red eyes, poured from the trees. They moved with an unnatural, jerky gait. Summoned from the realm Morgana sought to unleash, Behind them marched Damien's Blood Moon pack, their fur matted and their eyes glowing with a feral madness, clearly amplified by Morgana's dark magic. And standing in the center of it all was a woman who was the mirror image of the benevolent figures from Lena's visions, but twisted and corrupted. Her robes were black, her skin unnaturally pale, and her eyes, Lena's eyes, burned with a cold, hungry power. This was Morgana. "Granddaughter," Morgana's voice slithered through the air, bypassing the ears and sinking directly into Lena's mind. "You have consummated your bond with this animal. A foolish, sentimental gesture, no matter. His power will only make you stronger when I claim you." "I belong to no one but myself," Lena retorted, her voice amplified by a shimmer of moonlight. The power of the bond with Kael was a warm shield around her heart, silencing the shadow's whispers. With a roar that shook the trees, Kael launched himself forward. He shifted mid-air, his silver wolf form larger and more powerful than ever before, augmented by Lena's magic. He was a silver blur of righteous fury, tearing through the shadow creatures as if they were made of smoke. The silver moon followed their alpha's lead, crashing into the enemy line. The battle was a maelstrom of silver and black, of righteous growls and insane snarls. Lena did not stay back. She was no longer just a healer. She was a warrior. She thrust her hands forward, and a barrier of solid moonlight erupted in front of Maya and Finn, deflecting a volley of dark energy bolts from Ravenna. Maya flashed her a grateful, savage grin. "Nice trick. Luna," she yelled before charging back into the fray, her twin blades a dance of death. Lena focused, pulling on the bond, on the boundless energy it provided. She could feel the entire battlefield now, every pack member's pain, every enemy's position. She sent out waves of healing energy, mending minor wounds on her allies before they could become serious. She erected shields. She launched concussive blasts of pure light that disintegrated the shadow creatures on impact. She fought side by side with Darius, his hulking form a bastion of strength, protecting her flank while she unleashed her magic. The old, grizzled warrior who had once wanted her dead now fought with a rabid devotion to protect his Luna. But Morgana was on another level entirely. She floated just above the ground, a vortex of dark power with a wave of her hand. She sent a whip of pure shadow coiling towards Kael. He was too busy fighting Damien to see it coming. Kaelina screamed. She teleported. She didn't even know she could do that, appearing in a flash of silver light directly in the shadow's path. She threw up a shield, but the force of the impact was immense. It threw her backward, her head cracking against a tree. The world went fuzzy, stars exploding behind her eyes. "Foolish child," Morgana's voice hissed in her mind. "You cannot fight your own blood." Kael saw her fall. A guttural roar of pure, unadulterated rage ripped from his throat. He disengaged from Damien, ignoring the gash the other alpha opened on his shoulder, and charged toward Morgana. He was no longer a strategist or a leader. He was a mate whose other half had been harmed. He was vengeance incarnate. Morgana merely smiled, raising a hand. Thick, thorny vines erupted from the ground, wrapping around Kael, binding him, holding him fast no matter how much he struggled. "Now, granddaughter," Morgana said, turning her full attention to the dazed Lena. "Your lesson begins. You will learn that love is a weakness. You will watch him die, and in your despair, your true power will awaken, our power." She began to chant, and the life force began to drain from the struggling Kael. His powerful form weakened, his silver fur dulling. He let out a pained whimper, his amber eyes fixed on Lena, pleading with her to run. Seeing him in pain, seeing him dying because of her, did something to Lena. It didn't break her. It didn't fill her with despair. It filled her with rage. The ground around her began to tremble. Her eyes, once brown and green, began to glow with a pure, blinding silver light. The shadow inside her, the one she had feared for so long, rose up, but it didn't feel evil. It felt balanced. It was the other half of her power, the darkness of the new moon, the cold fury of the night sky. She wasn't her grandmother. She would not be consumed. She would command it. "You're wrong," Lena said, her voice a chorus of light and shadow. "Love isn't my weakness." She rose into the air, a vortex of swirling silver and black energy. "It's my weapon." The power that surged through Lena was terrifying and exhilarating. It was the light of the full moon and the void of the new moon, creation and destruction held in perfect, thrilling balance. She finally understood. Her ancestors weren't just witches of the moonlight, they were witches of the entire lunar cycle. Morgana had only embraced the darkness, but the true power came from embracing it all. With a scream that was both rage and release, Lena unleashed her newfound power, a wave of shimmering twilight energy, neither light nor shadow, but both exploded from her. It didn't harm the silver moon pack, passing through them like a cool breeze, but it slammed into the blood moon wolves and the shadow creatures, dissolving the summoned monsters into dust and sending Damien's pack reeling back, howling in agony as their dark enchantments were shattered. Morgana's eyes widened in genuine shock. Impossible! No one has wielded the balance in centuries. The vines holding Kale withered into ash. He staggered to his feet, his strength returning as Lena's power washed over him. He looked at her, floating in the air, a goddess of lunar fury, and his wolf heart swelled with pride and awe. That was his mate. "You took everything from me," Lena said, her voice resonating with power as she advanced on her grandmother. "My family, my past. You tried to turn me into you." "I tried to make you strong," Morgana shrieked, launching a torrent of black energy at her. Lena didn't even flinch. She raised a hand, and the dark magic was simply absorbed into the shadowy half of her aura, neutralizing it completely. "I am already strong," she declared. The final confrontation was a battle of ideologies made manifest. Morgana's attacks were pure, chaotic darkness, fueled by grief and hatred. Lena's were controlled, precise strikes of balanced energy. She used whips of light to disarm and shields of shadow to absorb. She was in complete control. While Lena kept Morgana occupied, Kale, now fully recovered, rejoined the fray with a vengeance. He and Damien circled each other, the two alphas locked in a final, brutal showdown. There was no strategy left, only years of rivalry and hatred. They clashed, a whirlwind of claws and fangs, a raw, primal fight for dominance. Lena could feel Kale's fight through the bond, his pain, his determination. It fueled her own. She formed a spear of solid moonlight in her hand and hurled it at Morgana. It pierced the witch's shoulder, forcing a cry of pain from her lips. "You are an anomaly," Morgana hissed, clutching her wound. "You should have fallen. Your love for that beast should have been your undoing." "You don't understand love, so you fear it," Lena said calmly, landing softly on the ground before her grandmother. "You think power comes from taking, but real power, the power of balance, comes from protecting." At that moment, Kale found his opening. He feinted left, and as Damien overcommitted, Kale lunged, his jaws closing around the other alpha's throat. There was a sickening crunch, and Damien Blackthorn fell, his mad reign over the Blood Moon pack finished. The remaining Blood Moon wolves, their dark enchantments gone and their alpha dead, faltered. Seeing their leader fall broke their morale completely. They turned and fled into the night, leaving only the witches behind. Ravenna, seeing her mistress failing, tried to launch a sneak attack, a poisoned dagger aimed at Lena's back, but Maya was faster. Her twin blades flashed, and the lesser witch fell with a shocked gasp, her own dagger clattering to the ground. Now, It was only Morgana, alone, beaten. "This isn't over." "Child," she spat, her body beginning to dissolve into shadow. "The darkness is a part of you. One day, it will call to you, and you will answer." With a final, hateful glare, she vanished, her malevolent presence lingering in the air for a moment before dissipating completely. Silence descended on the clearing, broken only by the ragged breathing of the victorious pack. The blood moon hung in the sky, its ominous light now looking pale and defeated. Lena's power receded, the vortex of energy fading away. She swayed on her feet, the monumental effort finally catching up to her. Kale, shifting back to his human form, was there in an instant, catching her in his arms. He held her tight against his bleeding, battered body, burying his face in her hair. "You did it," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Lena, you did it." She looked up at him, at the faces of the pack thane, Maya, Darius, Finn, all looking at her with expressions of pure, unadulterated reverence. They weren't just Kale's pack anymore. They were her pack. She was home. She leaned her head against Kale's chest, the steady beat of his heart the most beautiful sound in the world. "No," she whispered, her voice filled with a quiet, certain strength. "We did it." The dawn that followed the battle was the most beautiful Lena had ever seen. The sky was painted in soft hues of pink and gold, washing away the last remnants of the blood moon's crimson stain. The forest, though scarred by the fight, felt clean, as if a great sickness had finally passed. The pack was exhausted, wounded, but victorious. They worked together, tending to the injured, their movements efficient and unified. There was no more suspicion in Thane's eyes when he looked at Lena, only respect. Darius, who had fought like a demon to protect her, gave her a slow, solemn nod of allegiance that spoke more than words ever could. Lena moved among them, her hands glowing with gentle, silver light, healing the worst of the wounds. The bond with Kyle was a constant, warm hum beneath her skin. She could feel his pride, his relief, his overwhelming love, as clearly as she could feel the solid ground beneath her feet. He was never far from her side, his presence a silent, reassuring anchor. Later, as the sun climbed higher, they stood on the porch of her small house, the house that had become the unlikely epicenter of their new world. "What happens now?" Lena asked, looking out at the pack members who were beginning to rest in the morning sun. "Now, we rebuild," Kale said, his arm wrapped securely around her waist. "The Blood Moon pack is shattered. Their members will scatter or sue for peace. We have shown our strength. We have secured our territory." He looked down at her, his blue eyes soft, "and our pack has a new Luna." The title sent a thrill through her, a mix of fear and excitement. Luna, a leader, a protector. It was a world away from the quiet, lonely life of an ER doctor she had once craved, but she found she didn't miss that life at all. "I don't know how to be a Luna," she confessed. "You already are one," he said simply. "You fought for them, you healed them, you lead by example. You just need to lead with your heart. It's the same way you've done everything else." Their quiet moment was interrupted by Finn, who approached with his usual boundless energy, despite a bandage wrapped around his forearm. "Luna," he said, the title rolling off his tongue with easy reverence. "Elder Magnus says you should probably, quit your job." He grinned. "Being a witch, queen, werewolf Luna is kind of a full-time gig." Lena laughed, a real, unburdened sound. The thought of walking into the hospital and explaining she was leaving to help run a pack of werewolves was absurd, yet it was her reality. Dr. Min, her old mentor, would probably just nod knowingly. He always seemed to know more than he let on. That afternoon, a formal ceremony was held. It wasn't for a ritual, but for a welcome. The pack gathered, and Kyle, standing before them with Lena by his side, officially presented her. "The Great Spirit of the Moon has blessed us," he announced, his voice ringing with authority and pride. "She has sent us a protector, a healer, and a leader. She has sent me my mate. I present to you, Lena Pham, your Luna." A chorus of howls rose from the pack, a joyful, powerful sound that vibrated in Lena's bones. It wasn't a sound of aggression, but of acceptance, of family. They each came forward, one by one, to offer their allegiance, nuzzling her hand in their wolf forms or bowing their heads in their human ones. When it was Thane's turn, he stopped before her, his expression serious. "I judged you unfairly," he said, his voice low but clear. "Your courage has honored us all. Luna, I pledge my life and my loyalty to you and to our alpha." Tears pricked Lena's eyes as she accepted his pledge. The walls she had spent a lifetime building around her heart had not just been broken, they had been completely obliterated. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the yard, Kael led her away from the celebrating pack, walking hand in hand toward the creek. "Morgana's words," Lena began, a sliver of her old fear returning. "She said the darkness would call to me." Kael stopped and turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face. "The darkness is a part of you, Lena, just as the wolf is a part of me. It does not have to be your master." He smiled, a slow, breathtaking smile, "And if it ever gets too loud, you will have me and the entire pack to help you silence it. You will never be alone in the dark again." He kissed her then, a deep, lingering kiss filled with the promise of 1,000 sunrises to come. The scars of their battle remained, both on their bodies and in the forest around them, but they were not signs of damage. They were symbols of their survival, of the love that had been forged in the heart of the storm. This was not an end, but a new, wild, and wonderful beginning. The morning after the ceremony, Lena awoke in Kael's arms. They were in her bed, in her house, but everything felt different. The sunlight filtering through the curtains seemed brighter. The air felt cleaner. She could feel Kael's slow, steady breathing, the rhythmic beat of his heart against her back, and through the bond, she could feel his dreams, peaceful images of them running through the forest. A silver wolf and a woman bathed in moonlight. She turned in his arms to face him. He was still asleep. His handsome face relaxed and free of the constant tension he usually carried. The long black hair was fanned out across the pillow, and a faint silver scar, her mark, pulsed with a gentle light over his heart. She traced it with her finger, a sense of wonder filling her. This was her life now, waking up next to a werewolf alpha who was her soulmate. It was insane. It was perfect. His eyes fluttered open, the blue depths instantly finding hers. A slow smile spread across his face. "Good morning, my Luna," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. "Good morning, my alpha," she whispered back, leaning in to kiss him. The day was filled with a sense of purpose that felt new and invigorating. Lena, with Maya as her enthusiastic guide, took her first real tour of the pack's territory. It was vast, a sprawling expanse of ancient forest, hidden meadows and clear, rushing rivers. This was her home now, her responsibility. She met the other pack members, the ones who hadn't been at her house during the siege families with young children, elders who held the pack's history, skilled artisans and hunters. They treated her with a mixture of awe and warmth that was both humbling and comforting. The children, especially, were fascinated by her, their wide eyes following the faint shimmer of magic that now clung to her like a second skin. One little girl shyly offered her a wildflower, and Lena felt her heart melt. Kael spent the day re-establishing order. He met with the alphas of neighboring, neutral packs, forging new alliances built on the strength his pack had just proven. He sent patrols to the old Blood Moon territory to assess the situation. Thane was at his side, the perfect beta, his strategic mind already planning their next moves. In the evening, They all gathered around a large bonfire in the center of the pack's main settlement, a collection of rustic, beautiful cabins built deep in the woods. They shared food, told stories of the battle, and honored the memory of Reese, the young wolf they had lost. It was a somber moment, but it was filled with community and strength, not despair. Later, as the moon began to rise, Cale led Lena away from the fire, up a winding path to a high cliff that overlooked the entire valley. The view was breathtaking. The moonlight bathed the world in silver, and below them, the lights of the settlement twinkled like fallen stars. "My father used to bring me here," Cale said, his voice quiet. "He told me that an alpha doesn't rule the land. He serves it. He protects it. And everyone in it." He turned to her, taking her hands in his. "I never thought I would find someone to share this duty with, someone who would understand the weight of it." "We'll carry it together," Lena promised, her heart full. "I know," he said, a look of absolute faith in his eyes. He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her in a possessive, yet gentle embrace. "There's something else, Lena, something about the bond. It's more than just a connection of minds and magic." He lowered his head, his lips brushing against hers. "The curse is broken. The 3-moon deadline is gone. But the bond, it desires permanence. A family." Lena's breath hitched. A family. With him. The children she had seen today. The way their parents looked at them with such fierce love. It was everything she had ever secretly wanted. Is that what you want?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closing. "More than anything I have ever wanted in my life," he confessed, "to have a child with you, a child of both our worlds. It would be the greatest blessing the moon could ever give." The thought was both terrifying and wonderful. A child with his strength and her magic, a new generation, a symbol of the balance they had fought so hard to achieve. She looked out at the peaceful valley, at the home she had found, and then back at the man who was her entire world. Her fear was gone, replaced by a deep, unwavering certainty. "Me too," she whispered. Life settled into a new rhythm. Lena officially resigned from the hospital, a move that earned her a surprisingly understanding look and a quiet, "Be well, Lena," from Dr. Min. She devoted herself to her new role, learning the pack's laws from Magnus, training with Arya to hone her control over the balance of her powers, and, most importantly, getting to know her people. She established a proper infirmary in the settlement, her medical skills a perfect complement to the pack's natural healing abilities. Cale was a different man. The weight of his sole responsibility had been lifted, shared now with her. He smiled more freely, laughed more often. The pack thrived under their joint leadership. The balance of his alpha strength and her Luna's compassion made them stronger than ever before. Their love deepened with every passing day. It was in the quiet moments, the way he would bring her a cup of tea just as she was feeling tired, the way she would instinctively reach out and soothe the tension in his shoulders after a long day of patrols. It was a love that was both mythically grand and beautifully, simply domestic. One evening, about a month after the battle, Thane returned from a scouting mission with a troubled look on his face. "We found something at the old paper mill," he reported to Kyle and Lena. "Damien's headquarters. Morgana's magic still lingers there. But there's something else. A hidden cellar. It contains journals." They went to investigate. The mill was just as eerie as Lena remembered, but the oppressive dark magic was faded now, like a bad memory. In the hidden cellar, they found a stack of old leather-bound books. They were Morgana's journals. Lena's hands trembled as she opened the first one. The pages were filled with her grandmother's elegant, spidery script. She wrote of her life as a moonlight witch, of her love for her daughter, Lena's mother, Ilara. She wrote of the beauty of their magic, the sacred duty of maintaining the balance. Then the tone shifted. She wrote of Alara falling in love with a human, a man she described as kind and good, but weak, powerless. She wrote of her fear for her daughter, for a bloodline she feared would be diluted. The last entries were fractured, filled with grief and madness. She is gone. Alara is gone. The fire, they said it was an accident. Liars, it was the hunters, the humans who fear us. They took her from me. They took my light. I will show them darkness. I will burn their world to the ground. I will gain the power to bring her back, no matter the cost. Lena closed the journal, her heart aching. She wasn't born a monster. She whispered, looking at Kael. She was made one, by grief. She saw a horrifying parallel. Morgana had lost her child, and in her pain, had tried to destroy the world. Lena herself had almost fallen to darkness when she thought she was losing Kael. The line between them was thinner than she'd ever imagined. Her pain doesn't excuse her actions, Kael said gently, pulling her into an embrace. But it helps us understand, and it's a warning. Our emotions, our love, they are our greatest strength, but we must never let them be corrupted by fear or hate. There was another discovery in the cellar, a locked chest. Lena's magic, the balanced power of her bloodline, easily unsealed it. Inside was not an object of dark power, but a small velvet bag. Lena emptied its contents into her palm. It was a silver locket, tarnished with age. She opened it. On one side was a miniature portrait of a smiling woman with Lena's eyes, her mother, Alara. On the other side was a tiny sleeping baby. It was her. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched the locket, the only piece of her parents she had ever had. It was a remnant of a love Morgana's darkness had tried, and failed, to erase completely. She kept this, Lena said in awe, even in her madness. Some part of her held on to this. It was a sign. Morgana was not gone forever. Her influence was an echo, a warning. But the locket was also a promise. It was proof that love, the very thing Morgana had called a weakness, was the one power that truly endured. Months turned into a year. The Silver Moon Pack flourished, their territory secure, their people happy. The story of their victory over Morgana and the Blood Moon Pack became a legend whispered among the other supernatural factions, a tale of the Alpha and the Witch who had achieved the impossible. Lena and Kael ruled as one, their bond a source of immense strength and endless love. Lena had fully embraced her power, the light and the shadow within her held in perfect harmony. She was a healer, a protector, a warrior, and a leader. She was the Luna the pack had only dreamed of. One crisp autumn morning, Lena awoke with a familiar feeling. It was the same exhaustion she'd seen in 100 patients. A gentle, knowing smile touched her lips. She found Kael down by the creek, training some of the younger wolves. He looked up as she approached, his senses instantly alerting him to her presence, a bright smile lighting up his face. "Is everything all right?" he asked. His brow furrowed with a hint of concern as he jogged over to her. He could feel a change in her through the bond, something new. She didn't say a word. She simply took his large, calloused hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. She let him feel it through their connection, the tiny, flickering spark of a new life, a new heartbeat, faint but determined, beating in time with their own. His eyes widened, the brilliant blue darkening with an emotion so profound it left him speechless. He dropped to his knees before her, his hand still resting on her stomach. His head bowed. Awe, joy, an overwhelming, fierce wave of protectiveness and love washed through the bond, so powerful it made Lena gasp. He looked up at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Lena," he breathed. She nodded, her own tears beginning to fall. "We're going to have a baby," she confirmed. He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and buried his face against her, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the universe. The young wolves, seeing their alpha's display of pure joy, began to yip and howl, the sound carrying through the forest, a proclamation of the pack's happiness. That night, they stood on the cliff overlooking their home, just as they had a year before. A brilliant, full silver moon hung in the sky, bathing them in its benevolent light. "Everything I ever thought I knew about the world was wrong," Lena said softly, her hand resting on her stomach, Kael's hand covering hers. "I spent so long looking for peace and quiet, for a life without complications. And you ended up with a pack of werewolves, an evil witch for a grandmother, and a life of constant danger." Kael finished, a wry smile in his voice. "And I wouldn't trade it for anything," she said. Turning to face him, she looked into his eyes, the eyes that had seen her through her darkest moments, and saw her past, her present, and all of her tomorrows reflected there. "You gave me a home. You gave me a family. You helped me find myself. And you," he said, his voice thick with love, "healed a part of my soul I didn't even know was broken. You are my heart. Lena, you are the heart of this entire pack." He leaned in and kissed her, a slow, deep kiss under the light of the silver moon. It was a kiss of promises kept, of battles won, and of a future bright with hope. The darkness might still echo in the forgotten corners of the world, and new threats might one day rise, but standing here, together, with the love of their pack surrounding them and a new life growing between them, the Alpha and his Luna were ready. They were the balance, they were the guardians, and their love story, written in blood and moonlight, was only just beginning.